Welcome to the VOPCast, brought to you by Banfico. In this series, we explore the key challenges and opportunities in staying compliant with the upcoming instant payment regulation, with a special focus on verification of payee and how banks can go beyond compliance to proactively reduce fraud, protect their customers, and build trust.
Welcome to a new episode of Banfico's VOPCast series. Today's session will be focused on the subject of the need for global VOP standards. My name is Paulo Barbosa, CEO at Banfico, and today I am honored to have Ximena Aleman, co-CEO and co-founder at Prometeo, joining us directly from Uruguay. So, bienvenida, Ximena.
Muchas gracias, Paulo. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks for having me and Prometeo to discuss such an interesting and I think amazing issue, which is verification of payee across the globe.
Awesome. Maybe, Ximena, can you just briefly tell us a little bit about yourself and what Prometeo is doing on this verification of payee space on that side of the world?
Okay. So as you mentioned, I am co-founder and co-CEO of Prometeo. I have been building banking API infrastructure for almost 6 years in LATAM, pioneering what has been the open banking adoption across the region. With this banking API, our customers can do verification of payee. That is the subject that brings us here today. Happy to discuss that. We've been building verification of payee since 2021.
That's very interesting, and I do see a lot of common ground with Banfico and what we have been working in the UK with the implementation of confirmation of payee, and in Europe with verification of payee. So in both cases, these are regulatory requirements. So the banks were sort of forced by the regulators to implement this verification of payee mechanisms. And before we zoom out into a global approach, I think it's important to understand how these variations happen in different parts of the world. So can you tell us how verification of payee is being implemented across the region, and if there are any national flavors of verification of payee that you see there?
Yeah. And so, definitely, I would say that something that it's very important to take into account when we talk about LATAM, especially when we talk about LATAM from outside LATAM perspective, is that definitely it's a region, but you cannot approach it as a single market. So it's not the same as the EU, and it's not the same as the United States, but definitely you have in each country a different reality, especially when it comes to new features as verification of payee.
On your comment about EU being more of a harmonized geography, that's not really the case. So although when people think about the EU, they think about a group of countries very similar, but then there are very specific national difficulties that we need to handle. And I think this implementation of verification of payee regulatory framework in Europe, if you take it outside and make it global, these difficulties will be further expanded. So
definitely. I think that's something that we should all take into account, is that we're about legacy systems, that are still in place, siloed systems that keep data closed. And so I think that that's a struggle across the globe. That's what it's being modernized.
And that's a good follow-up, to zoom out of this national implementation. So be it something which is driven by the regulator or a market-led initiative, I think everyone agrees that there is value on this verification of payee mechanism, and that it's a very interesting tool to fight against fraud, particularly when we talk about instant payments and how instant payments are growing globally. So zooming out, we know that about 43% of fraud is cross-border. So while we are creating national and regional implementations for VOP, why do you think it's so hard to have these use cases happening cross-border, between these different regional solutions and national solutions?
I feel like, in particular, it has a lot to do with what I mentioned just before, which is we are still trying to cope with the disruption domestically. And so if we talk about, like, I would say that right now where the focus is in a domestical level is in instant payment, and the modernization to real-time payments rails. That has been a huge push in Latin America. And of course that I feel like the necessity for verification of pay is huge, and we can double click on how it's fraud in Latam, and why this needs to get done. And then this has a very strong value proposition in Latam's ecosystem.
Yeah, so that was a bit the way the regulator framed it in Europe. They said, because we are now enabling this instant payment use case, we will open the door for instant fraud use case. So we need to put something in place to try to block this fraud. So that's the whole reason VOP was it's included in the instant payment regulation in Europe, and that's why it's being pushed. And I think it will it will be the main driver for this to become even more of a global trend that it already is. And I would say it's not the first time it will be done. So if you look at other successes that happened in the past. So card schemes are, I think, a very good example of, the industry coming together and building something that works across the globe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I think that something that it's interesting to see is how account-to-account payments have been adopted in Latin America, because I think that if we see the adoption that these new payment methods have had and the impact that they've had in Latam's economy, you can somehow extrapolate why it's the need of this verification of pay, and it's huge. I think that there's a lot. That there's a lot of room for improvement in how security is being framed from an account-based payments perspective. Right now, I would say like any checkout in Brazil has peaks, or if it doesn't, it hits in a disadvantage. And we are seeing like across Latam an explosive use of account-based payment methods. Like in Peru, Yape, it's a huge success, and overall, right now, I would say that the last time I checked, in Latin America, last year, account-based payments accounted for 24% of the total volume transaction online. Okay,
Mhm.
which is huge. In Brazil, of course, it's like 40%. But we can see how account-based payments are disrupting this industry, and because this is happening, we need to get in place mechanisms to avoid fraud explosion, because at the same time, fraud is becoming more and more aggressive in Latin America, and Latam is one of the most exposed regions in the world to fraud. And I think
Yeah.
that that's huge. I don't know how is this being approached in Europe.
Yeah. So account to account, it's. I think it's been a regulatory strategy to push for this as well. By the way, PIX payments are now being supported in some countries in Europe. So
Wow.
this cross-border account-to-account instant payments is already a reality. So the risk is there. This PIX is more of a closed loop, but I think this will become the norm, and the momentum is critical for us to try to come together and do something. And I think that's what, coming to the subject of this conversation, I think we need to come together as an industry and enable this global scheme and connect all these different regional and national solutions to make them interoperable. So I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel. If you are operating something that works in your part of the world, and I'm operating something that works in my part of the world, let's just do something together and connect them. And I think that's where we, as an industry, need to come together and solve these issues.
Yeah, definitely, because I think that interesting is that time to market is already here, because of of what we just mentioned. The necessity is clear. When we started building account verification of payee, we called it a bank account verification. Verification of PE wasn't a thing, and it was almost 4 years now. And we started building it because we have customers that were demanding it. It was a very market-driven approach. Financial institutions that needed to verify the payee before sending a payment, and financial institutions that needed that because their customers needed that. That they were doing large payments to LATAM and needed to verify the recipient's account. And for us, it was, I would say, when we started building it, it was a very small use case. Like we totally underestimated it. Like, let's do it because customers are asking for it, but who knows, like how much demand this will have. And we got surprised when it started to get more and more traction, and it became more and more attractive. And so I think that from my impression on how this is being adopted across the globe, you can sense a little of standardization on how this information needs to be provided. I think that at least like most players who are coming into the space, we understand like there is a very market-driven approach to this standardization, and so I think that it's not that far away. I feel like, as you mentioned, as card issuing and card frameworks, we are getting to a point in which it's not a dream, but more of a market-driven reality, to have like this verification of payee global standards.
Yes. So we can all make it happen fast. So we cannot have an instant payment and have a pre-payment verification that takes much longer than the payment itself. So in order for this to be fast and resilient and available, we need to come together and we need to play by the same rules. So I think that's on us as an industry to come up with these global standards and work together to make it happen.
Yeah, and I don't know what's your impression, but on my end, I think that perhaps what is hard or difficult to navigate is the data protection and data compliance realities in each of the countries, so that regulators understand why this data needs to be like open or disclosed or to a certain point available, in order to the verification of payee to happen. And I think that
Yes.
perhaps there's a little bit of more noise into this becoming a reality.
I think that's a great open question for us to close this session. I don't think we'll come up with all the answers for all these questions on this meeting, but again, as an industry, we can come together and look at this and balance the pros and cons of to what extent we need to protect data protection versus expose our clients to fraud. And that's where rules and things are defined in a global scheme. So I think we can both agree that the answer to our session in the form of a question is that yes, we need global schemes, and happy to work together with Prometeo and other global partners to make this happen.
Yeah, definitely. I think that those global schemes will get in place, and I think that we will be in a few years from now, we will be proudly we will be able to say that we did it, and I think that that will happen, and we'll be able to navigate all of the issues and happily have a global scheme for verification of payee.
Awesome. Thank you, Ximena, again for your availability and for taking the time to share such insightful knowledge. And we'll be in touch again, I'm sure. And for all the audience, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Happy to take these discussions further. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Paulo. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of the VOPCast. For more information or to schedule a demo, contact our experts at VOP@banfico.com. Don't miss the next episode. We'll be back with more insights to help you meet the October deadline.